Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, veteran archaeologist Dr. Marcus Harrington led his small expedition through dense, suffocating vegetation. What began as a routine survey transformed when they discovered an ancient cave entrance sealed with massive stones carved with undecipherable symbols. Despite warnings from terrified local guides who refused to approach what they called the breathing jungle, Marcus broke through. Inside lay a perfectly preserved underground world. Artifacts untouched by time, walls covered in faintly glowing markings, and skeletal remains unlike any human he'd ever studied. As scientific teams rushed to the site, strange phenomena began affecting the camp. Equipment failures, unexplained sounds, and team members reporting disturbing dreams. What ancient power had Marcus accidentally awakened after centuries of containment? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Universidad Nacional's archaeology department was eerily quiet at such a late hour. Dr. Marcus Harrington hunched over his desk, the yellow lamplight casting deep shadows across his weathered face. At 62, his once brown hair had long since surrendered to silver, but his eyes retained the sharp intensity that had defined his 40-year career. "They called me a fool," he muttered, carefully arranging decades of notes. Maps of the Amazon basin, carbon dating results, and fragment sketches carpeted every surface. He paused on a photograph of himself, 30 years younger, proudly displaying a small bronze artifact with concentric rings. A knock interrupted his contemplation. "Enter!" Marcus called. Not looking up, Dr. Lucia Reyes stepped in, her practical field clothes contrasting with the academic setting. At 38, the geologist had built a respectable reputation analyzing soil compositions from archaeological sites worldwide. "The board approved your funding request," she said, placing an envelope on his desk, though Professor Whitman called it throwing good money after bad theories. Marcus allowed himself a thin smile. "Whitman will frame my discovery on his office wall when we return, if we find anything," Lucia reminded him. "This is your last university-backed expedition." They were quite clear about that. Marcus stood, retrieving a worn leather journal from his bookshelf. 40 years tracking pre-Columbian anomalies. Every expedition, every fragment, pointing to the same conclusion: an advanced civilization predating all known Amazon cultures. Theory rejected by every peer-reviewed journal. Came another. Voice from the doorway. James Chen, 45 and impeccably dressed despite the late hour, leaned against the doorframe. Once Marcus's most promising student, he'd become his most prominent academic critic. "James," Marcus acknowledged. "Surprised the university assigned you to my expedition." "I volunteered," James said. "Someone needs to document this objectively." For the historical record, their tense exchange was broken by the appearance of Eva Santos, 29, adjusting her camera equipment as she entered. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "Had to grab the new low-light lenses. They'll be perfect for jungle canopy shots. And our guide?" Marcus asked. "Carlos Mendez," Lucia answered. 52, indigenous heritage, knows the region better than anyone, and believes every local superstition," James added dismissively. "Indigenous knowledge has proven valuable on multiple expeditions," Marcus countered, tucking his journal into his pack. "We leave tomorrow. Backlight, but thorough." 3 weeks later, the expedition pushed deeper into the Amazon than any university team had ventured in decades. The dense canopy filtered sunlight into scattered beams that barely reached the forest floor. Humidity clung to skin like a second layer. "We should have reached the river junction yesterday," James said, consulting his GPS. "This can't be right." Carlos, their stocky guide, gestured ahead. "The landmarks are wrong. The jungle has changed." "Impossible," James argued. "Satellite imagery." "The jungle breathes," Carlos interrupted. "It shifts." Marcus stopped suddenly, kneeling to examine a half-buried stone marker. He brushed away centuries of growth, revealing symbols matching his journal sketches. "We're close," he whispered. That night, as the team camped, Marcus sat alone by the fire, his journal open to pages of notes about the celestial compass discovered on his first Amazon expedition. The ancient bronze device had confounded experts. Its concentric rings, aligned not to magnetic north, but to a specific star pattern that appeared only once every 70 years. "What were you pointing to?" Marcus whispered, tracing the compass illustration. In their tents, the team members tossed in troubled sleep. Lucia dreamed of sinking into living soil. James heard whispers in a language he almost understood. Ava's dreams filled with shadows, moving independently of their sources. At dawn, Carlos approached Marcus, his expression grave. "The men won't continue," he said. "They say we approach Puutikai, the breathing place." "The forbidden ground, superstition," Marcus dismissed. "No," Carlos said firmly. "My grandfather's grandfather told of stone doors with star symbols, of guardians who ensure what sleeps remains asleep." Marcus's head snapped up. "Stone doors? Where?" Carlos pointed reluctantly toward a dense section of jungle. "There, but we should not go." "The jungle breathes there." Marcus was already packing his equipment, his hands trembling with anticipation. 40 years of academic ridicule might end today. What sleeps can awaken, Carlos warned. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. Dawn painted the jungle in misty gold as the team stood before the massive stone structure. Creeping vines and centuries of growth had nearly consumed it, but there was no mistaking its artificial nature, a perfect vertical slab embedded in the hillside. "Covered in weathered symbols, impossible," James whispered, running his hands over the carved surface. "These symbols match fragmented patterns from sites thousands of miles apart. They shouldn't be here together." Marcus approached reverently, his fingers tracing grooves worn by millennia. "Not impossible, just hidden from those unwilling to see connections." Lucia pressed her geological tools against the stone. "This isn't native to the region. It's not even South American in origin. The mineral composition," she frowned at her readings. "I can't identify it." Carlos remained 20 paces back, refusing to approach. 2 of the porters had already departed at first light, mumbling prayers and drawing protective symbols in the air. "Carlos, we need everyone's help to document this," Eva called, adjusting her camera to capture the wall's dimensions. "My people have stories," Carlos replied, his voice tight. The breathing place was sealed by the star-touched shamans. What sleeps inside should remain asleep. Marcus ignored him, focused entirely on the symbols. "These match my journal entries exactly. Fragments I've collected from Peru, Bolivia, even Mexico, all here in one complete sequence." "Dr. Harrington," Eva called, reviewing her camera display. "There's something odd about the center of the door. The stone pattern changes." The team converged on the spot Eva indicated, a circular area where the weathering pattern subtly differed. "It's a mechanism," Marcus murmured. "A lock of some kind." James examined university protocols on his tablet. "We should report this before proceeding. Get proper permits," Marcus snorted. "So Whitman can take over? Claim my life's work? So we don't destroy invaluable archaeological evidence," James countered. Their argument was interrupted by Lucia's voice from several yards away. "I found something." She held up a strange metallic object partially embedded in the ground, slender, forked at one end like a tuning fork, with intricate engravings along its length. "Be careful," Carlos warned from his position. "The old stories speak of singing keys that woke the sleepers." Marcus took the object from Lucia, examining it with trembling hands. "It's made of the same unidentifiable alloy as the particles I found at the Nazca site." Without warning, he struck it against a nearby stone. The object emitted a pure, haunting tone that seemed to hang in the air unnaturally. The effect was immediate. Birds erupted from nearby trees. Carlos dropped to his knees, hands over his ears. The remaining porters fled into the jungle, but most startling was the door. The circular mechanism began to vibrate. "Dust falling from crevices untouched for centuries. Strike it again," Marcus urged, his voice filled with academic hunger. "Marcus," James cautioned, "we should—" But Marcus had already struck the fork against the stone again. This time the tone was deeper, resonating with something inside the door. The circular mechanism began to turn. "Eva, are you recording this?" Marcus asked, eyes never leaving the door. "Every second," she confirmed, though her camera hand trembled slightly. A third strike produced yet another tone. The door mechanism rotated further. Particles of stone and dust cascaded from the edges. "It's responding to specific frequencies," Lucia observed, scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming caution. James backed away. "We need to stop. This site needs proper—" "One more," Marcus whispered, striking the fork a final time. The tone that emerged wasn't like the others. It resonated at a frequency that made teeth ache and vision blur. The circular mechanism completed its rotation with a grinding finality, then silence. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a massive intake of breath, the stone door receded inward. Carlos turned and ran, taking the last porters with him. "The jungle breathes." "Ooh," he shouted back. "You've woken it." Cool air rushed from the opening, air that tasted ancient and somehow wrong. Marcus stepped forward, flashlight revealing the beginning of a passageway extending into darkness. The beam caught glimpses of polished surfaces reflecting with an unnatural blue luminescence. 40 years, he whispered. 40 years of searching, Marcus, James said quietly. What have we opened? The resonance chime in Marcus's hand vibrated once more of its own accord, as if responding to something calling from deep within the darkness. The team advanced cautiously into the darkness, their flashlight beams cutting through air that felt thick and charged with something indefinable. The passage widened, revealing a vast chamber that defied archaeological precedent. "This architecture shouldn't exist," James murmured, training his light on perfectly smooth walls rising to a domed ceiling. "Not here, not anywhere in pre-Columbian America." The walls themselves provided illumination. Patches of blue-green bioluminescence pulsed gently, seeming to track their movements. As they progressed deeper, the patches brightened, as if awakening after centuries of dormancy. "Some kind of fungi," Lucia said, approaching a wall section. She reached toward it cautiously. "Don't touch anything," Marcus warned, but too late. As Lucia's fingers neared the glowing patch, it brightened and shifted color slightly. She jerked her hand back. "It's responding," she whispered, "almost like it's aware." Eva documented everything, her camera sweeping across the impossible architecture. "The fungi patterns are changing behind us. Look at my viewfinder." The team turned. Where they had walked, the bioluminescent patterns had shifted, forming what appeared to be a trailing path marking their progress. "Perfect preservation conditions," Marcus observed, gesturing to niches cut into the walls. Each contained artifacts, ceramic vessels, textile remnants, and implements of unknown purpose, all in pristine condition. "No decay, no deterioration," he continued. "The temperature, the humidity, it's all controlled somehow." James examined a series of symbols engraved into a central column. "These don't match any known writing system, yet there are elements of Mayan, Quechua, and something else entirely. Focus on documenting everything," Marcus instructed. "Lucia, collect samples of that bioluminescent organism. Eva, I want complete photographic coverage." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Marcus approached a raised platform at the chamber's center. Upon it rested a bowl-shaped depression filled with what appeared to be liquid mercury. But it moved against gravity, forming patterns and shapes like a living thing. "James," he called softly. "Look at this." James approached cautiously. "Metallic liquid. Mercury was used in some ancient Chinese tombs, but it's not mercury," Marcus interrupted, reaching toward it. "Marcus, don't—" Marcus's fingers touched the surface. Instead of rippling like liquid, the substance adhered to his fingertips, stretching upward like it was reaching for him. When he withdrew his hand, a small portion separated from the main mass. Clinging to his skin, the substance moved across his palm, reshaping itself continuously. "It's responding to me," Marcus whispered, fascinated. "I can almost feel it thinking." The metallic substance formed a small sphere, then a pyramid, then a complex geometric shape unlike anything recognizable. James backed away. "We need to document this and leave, immediately." But Marcus was entranced. "Don't you see what this means? This technology, it's not human. It's not of this earth." While they focused on the strange metal, Lucia had been collecting fungi samples in specimen containers. "These organisms shouldn't exist either," she called over. "The cellular structure is unlike any known fungal species." Eva, meanwhile, had discovered something more disturbing in an alcove, partially hidden behind a column. "Dr. Harrington," she called, voice tight. "You need to see this." The team converged on Eva's position. Her flashlight illuminated what at first appeared to be a human skeleton in a seated position. But as the light played across the remains, the abnormalities became apparent. "The skull structure," James whispered. "The elongated cranium. It's not artificial modification like the Paracas' skulls." "The ribcage," Lucia added. "The vertebrae count is wrong. And look at the hand structure. 6 digits, not 5. Marcus approached the remains reverently. "We've found them. The star people from the legends. The ones who came from above." "This is impossible," James insisted, though his voice had lost its certainty. A soft hum suddenly emanated from the living metal still clinging to Marcus's palm. It vibrated, then formed into a shape eerily similar to the skeletal remains before them. "We need to set up a base camp," Marcus decided, eyes gleaming with the fervor of vindication. "And contact the university. The world needs to see this." "If they'll believe it," Ava said, reviewing the footage on her camera. She frowned. "That's strange." "What?" Lucia asked. "There's interference in the video and—" She pointed to a dark area of the footage. "What's that shadow?" "None of us were standing there." Marcus glanced at his palm, where the living metal had formed yet another shape. Now, a perfect miniature replica of the chamber they stood in, complete with tiny figures representing each of them, and one additional figure, standing in exactly the spot Eva's camera had captured the unexplained shadow. The team established a base camp near the entrance chamber, equipment arranged in a defensive circle illuminated by portable lights that cast harsh shadows against ancient walls. Outside, night had fallen, bringing with it a strange stillness. No insect sounds penetrated the cave entrance. No wind disturbed the humid air. Marcus sat hunched over his satellite phone, voice low but intense. "No, Professor Whitman, I'm not exaggerating. We found evidence of non-human intelligent life having visited Earth in pre-Columbian times." He listened, face tightening. "I understand your skepticism, but the photographs Eva has transmitted—" He frowned at the phone's screen. "Hello, Professor?" And the connection had gone dead. "The signal's been deteriorating all evening," James said, checking his own devices. "And our equipment batteries are draining at an alarming rate." He held up his backup power pack. "This was fully charged 6 hours ago. It's completely dead now." Lucia looked up from her examination of fungi samples. "There's an electromagnetic field pervading this entire structure. It's subtle, but my instruments detected it before they stopped working." Eva reviewed her camera footage on a laptop, brow furrowed. "The video corruption is getting worse. And those shadow anomalies—" She turned the screen to show the others. "They're in almost every shot now." The team gathered around the screen. Shadowy figures stood at the periphery of each frame, never fully in focus. Never directly looking at the camera, but unmistakably present. "Equipment malfunction," James suggested without conviction. "No," Eva said firmly. "My backup camera shows the same anomalies. 2 separate systems, same phenomena." Marcus returned to a flat stone he'd discovered in a side chamber. Circular, with an intricate spiral pattern carved into its surface, it sat heavily in his palm. Since finding it, he'd been unable to leave it alone for long, drawn to its perfect geometric precision. "I've been translating some of the wall inscriptions," he said, running his fingers along the stone's spiral grooves. "They mention watchers or observers from between the stars, beings that exist partially in our reality. Mythology." James dismissed, though his voice lacked its usual academic certainty. Is it? Marcus challenged, holding up the stone disc. This artifact appears in multiple wall carvings. It's called, he consulted his notes, something like thought catcher or dream mirror in their language. What's it supposed to do? Lucia asked. The inscription suggested it was used to facilitate communication between our world and theirs. The lights flickered suddenly, plunging the chamber into momentary darkness before stabilizing. We should leave tomorrow, James said into the tense silence that followed. Return with a proper team, more equipment, government permits, and let someone else claim my discovery? Marcus clutched the stone disc tightly. Your discovery may be more dangerous than you realize, James countered. As night deepened, the team retreated to their sleeping bags, exhaustion overcoming scientific excitement. Yet sleep brought no rest. Each member tossed and turned, experiencing vivid dreams that seemed more like memories. Lucia dreamed of flying through star fields, viewing Earth from above. James found himself in ancient ceremonies, watching human supplicants bow before beings of light and shadow. Eva dreamed of eyes watching from every shadow, patient and ancient. And Marcus dreamed of knowledge, vast libraries of information flowing directly into his mind, secrets of creation, histories of civilizations long turned to dust, the true origin of humanity. He awoke with a gasp to find himself standing before the wall of inscriptions, the dream-catcher stone clutched in his outstretched hand. He had no memory of leaving his sleeping bag. The stone was warm to the touch, almost vibrating with energy. The spiral pattern seemed to move when viewed from the corner of his eye, though it remained static when looked at directly. "What are you?" he whispered to the artifact, as if in response. The bioluminescent fungi throughout the chamber pulsed once in perfect unison, illuminating the entire space in a flash of blue-green light. In that moment, Marcus saw them. Transparent silhouettes, standing among the sleeping team members. Humanoid but wrong in subtle ways, too tall, too thin, heads too large. The light returned to normal levels immediately, and the figures vanished. But the image remained burned in Marcus's vision. He looked down at the stone disc in his hand. Along its edge, new symbols had appeared, symbols that hadn't been there when he found it, and somehow, impossibly, he could read them. "We have always been here," the symbol said. "Watching, waiting, now you have opened the door." Morning arrived without sunlight, marked only by watches and phones. The team gathered around a portable stove, nursing cups of instant coffee. Dark circles shadowed their eyes, evidence of shared restless nights. "I've been analyzing the fungi samples," Lucia said, breaking the silence. "The cellular structure is unlike anything in our biological classification system. The organelles don't match known patterns. The inscriptions mention living walls and watching sentinels," Marcus added. "I believe the fungi network is some kind of monitoring system." A crackling from their radio interrupted the discussion. Through heavy static, a voice emerged. "Base camp to expedition team. Do you copy? This is Dr. Grace Wong and Dr. Bennett Reed, University Dispatch." James grabbed the radio. "This is Dr. Chen, we copy. Your timing is impeccable. We've been trying to reach you for hours," the female voice responded. "The university received your initial transmissions. They've sent us as scientific support. We're at the coordinates you provided with additional equipment." Marcus took the radio. "Did Whitman send you?" "No," came the reply. He recused himself, said something about not legitimizing pseudoscience. "President Santiago authorized our dispatch directly." An hour later, 2 new members joined their camp. Dr. Grace Wong, a microbiologist in her 50s with practical field clothes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and Dr. Bennett Reed, a linguist whose boyish appearance belied his 40 years. "The university is skeptical but intrigued," Grace explained, unpacking sophisticated equipment. "Your transmitted images showed anomalies that warrant investigation, though several board members suggested your footage was manipulated," Bennett added with an apologetic smile. "Show them." Marcus instructed Eva. Eva played footage on her laptop. revealing the chamber with its non-human remains and the strange shadows that shouldn't exist. Grace leaned closer. Extraordinary. And you've collected biological samples. The fungi appear to be a single interconnected organism, Lucia confirmed. And there's a metallic substance that responds to touch and thought. I'm more interested in these inscriptions, Bennett said, examining Marcus's photographs. They contain elements of multiple ancient languages, but reconfigured in ways that defy linguistic evolution. Marcus retrieved a triangular prism from his pack. I found this yesterday in a side chamber. Watch. He positioned his flashlight behind the crystalline object, directing it toward a wall covered in symbols. The light passing through the prism projected the symbols onto the opposite wall, but transformed them into recognizable words. Incredible, Bennett breathed. It's translating in real time. The projected text shifted between languages, fragments of Latin, Proto-Indo-European, and others, but maintaining consistent meaning that Bennett read aloud. The Watchers came when stars aligned. They brought knowledge and took flesh. When corruption began, the Guardians sealed them in between spaces. James questioned. Dimensional pockets, Marcus suggested. The inscriptions describe beings that exist partially in our reality and partially in another. Grace finished calibrating her equipment. These readings are off the charts. The electromagnetic field here is structured, not random. Almost like a containment system, Lucia finished. Bennett continued reading the projected translation. The sealed doorways must remain closed. What watches from beyond hungers for form. As the implications settled, James spoke up. We need to explore further. Document everything before reporting back. I thought you wanted to leave, Marcus said with surprise. That was before I saw proof you were right, James admitted. My entire career, I've followed conventional archaeological doctrine. But this, he gestured to their surroundings. This changes everything we know about human history. The expanded team prepared to venture deeper into the cave system, following a passage that sloped downward. The bioluminescent fungi grew more concentrated as they descended, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like communication. Grace monitored her instruments. The electromagnetic field is stronger here. And there's another reading I can't identify, almost like neural activity, but on a massive scale. The passage opened into a vast chamber with a domed ceiling covered in what appeared to be a star map. Below stood a platform with a central altar. It's a temple, Marcus whispered. Or a laboratory. Bennett directed the translator prism toward inscriptions surrounding the altar. The projected translation appeared ominous in its clarity. Here the flesh merger was performed. Here the Watchers took form. Here the door between was sealed. Eva's camera began malfunctioning, the screen showing only static, with occasional flashes of figures moving at the edges. Something's here with us, she said quietly. The team turned slowly, flashlights sweeping the chamber. Nothing was visible, yet everyone felt the weight of observation. Bennett continued translating. They wait in the spaces between. They watch through dreams. When the seal breaks, they will return. The translator prism suddenly grew hot in Marcus's hand. A crack appeared along its surface, then another. Light blazed from within as it shattered, leaving Marcus holding fragments that cut into his palm. Blood dripped onto the chamber floor. The drops sizzled on contact, and the bioluminescent fungi around them flared brilliant blue. We should go back, James said urgently, but Marcus was staring at his bleeding hand, transfixed. I can hear them now, he whispered. They're speaking to me. 1 week into the expedition, the cave had become a hive of scientific activity. Additional equipment lined the walls of the base camp. Specimens sat carefully labeled in containment units. Digital screens displayed scrolling data from various chambers, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, charged with an indefinable tension. And Marcus had changed most of all. He hasn't slept in 3 days, James whispered to Grace, as they observed Marcus hunched over a strange object at the far side of the chamber. Just stares at that thing he found yesterday. The object resembled an hourglass, but contained no sand. Instead, luminescent particles swirled within, moving in patterns that defied physics, sometimes flowing upward, sometimes forming complex geometric structures before dissolving again. His behavior concerns me, Grace replied. The blood work I ran shows anomalies. Foreign proteins, altered neurotransmitter levels. Could it be exposure to the fungi? James asked. No, this is something else. Something changing him at the cellular level. Across the chamber, Bennett and Lucia pored over translation notes. The references keep mentioning time fluid and moments between moments, Bennett said. As if these entities experience time differently than we do. The electromagnetic readings support that theory, Lucia replied. There are quantum fluctuations throughout the cave system, localized temporal distortions. Eva approached them, reviewing footage on her camera. Look at this! She pointed to a frame showing Marcus near the altar. A transparent figure stood behind him, hand outstretched toward his shoulder. This wasn't visible to the naked eye. Only the camera caught it. When was this? Bennett asked. Yesterday. Right after he found that hourglass thing. At that moment, Marcus called out, voice unnaturally resonant. I figured it out. The hourglass doesn't just measure time, it bends it. Creates pockets where time moves differently. The team gathered reluctantly around him. The particles within the device moved faster as they approached, forming patterns that hurt the eyes to observe directly. The entities exist in these pockets, Marcus continued, eyes fever-bright. Not fully in our reality. The original inhabitants built this place as a bridge between dimensions. Marcus, James said carefully, you need rest. You're not thinking clearly. I've never thought more clearly, Marcus snapped. They've shown me the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations, technologies we can't imagine. Who has shown you? Grace asked. The Watchers. They speak to me now. Marcus held up the hourglass. Through this, time is different for them. They experience all moments simultaneously. The particles within the hourglass suddenly froze, hanging suspended in perfect geometric alignment. Then impossibly, they began moving backward. What's happening? Eva whispered. Camera recording. Temporal reversion, Marcus said, but his voice had changed, layered with another tone beneath it. The bridge is forming. The air around Marcus shimmered. For a brief moment, a translucent figure seemed to occupy the same space as his body. Taller, thinner, with an elongated head and large, lidless eyes. My God, Bennett breathed. Grace's instruments began beeping urgently. His brainwave patterns are impossible. Two distinct signatures occupying the same neural pathways. The hourglass pulsed with light. Marcus gasped, the overlapping image fading. He slumped forward, catching himself on the edge of the table. Marcus! James approached cautiously. Marcus looked up, blinking rapidly. Something was in my mind, he shuddered. It's still there, watching, waiting. We need to leave, Lucia said firmly. Now this place isn't a discovery, it's a containment facility. No! Marcus clutched the hourglass protectively. We can't leave. The knowledge they offer, it would advance humanity by centuries. At what cost? James demanded. Look what it's doing to you. You don't understand, Marcus insisted. They were here before us. They seeded human civilization, guided our evolution. They want to help us again. That's not you talking, Grace said quietly. Your blood chemistry is changing by the hour. Foreign compounds flooding your system. We're leaving tomorrow, James announced. All of us. I'm calling for extraction, Marcus's expression darkened. The university sent you to undermine me, didn't they? To steal my discovery? Marcus, this isn't you, Eva pleaded. I've never been more myself, he replied. His fingers caressed the hourglass, the particles within mirroring his movements. We're staying. There's a ritual described in the inner chamber. A way to fully open the bridge. What ritual? Bennett asked, despite himself. Marcus smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. They'll show us. When the time comes. That night, as the team slept uneasily, Marcus stood before the altar in the central chamber, the hourglass glowing in his hands. The particles within had formed a double helix pattern that rotated slowly. I understand, he whispered to the empty air. Blood is the key. The final component. From the shadows around him, whispers answered in a language no human throat could produce. And Marcus nodded, as if he understood perfectly. Dawn broke outside the cave, though no sunlight penetrated the depths where the team had established their camp. James hunched over the satellite phone, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. "I don't care what protocols say. We need extraction today. Medical emergency." He listened, face grim. "Yes, I understand the helicopter can't land in the jungle. We'll make our way to the clearing." He disconnected and turned to face the others. "Transport will meet us 5 miles northeast. We leave in 1 hour." Grace was packing specimen containers, carefully sealing fungi samples. "What about Marcus?" "We'll sedate him if necessary," James replied. "Something in this place is affecting his mind. We need to get him to a medical facility." "Where is he now?" Lucia asked, looking around the camp. "He said he was checking equipment in the lower chamber," Bennett answered. "I saw him about an hour ago." Eva, reviewing footage on multiple screens, suddenly straightened. "Everyone needs to see this." She gestured them closer. The screen showed Marcus in the central chamber, alone at the altar. He had opened a hidden compartment in the stone floor and withdrawn a strange device, cylindrical with multiple rings that rotated independently, emitting a soft, pulsing light. In the footage, Marcus activated the device. The rings began spinning rapidly, creating a visual distortion in the air around him. Then, horrifyingly, shapes began to materialize, translucent at first, gradually gaining solidity. Tall, emaciated figures with elongated limbs and oversized heads surrounding Marcus in a circle. "When was this?" James demanded. 20 minutes ago, Eva whispered. "It's happening now." The team grabbed flashlights and essential equipment, racing through the tunnels toward the central chamber. The bioluminescent fungi pulsed erratically as they passed. As if agitated by their presence, they halted at the chamber entrance. Stunned by the scene before them, Marcus stood at the center, holding the strange device above his head. Around him, partially materialized figures moved in a slow circular pattern. The air itself seemed distorted, reality bending inward toward the device like fabric being pulled through a hole. "Marcus!" James called out. Marcus turned, but his expression was wrong, vacant, yet somehow animated by something else. "You're just in time," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that hurt the ears. "The conjunction is beginning. The veil grows thin. What have you done?" Bennett asked, horror evident in his voice. "Activated the disruptor," Marcus replied. "It weakens the barrier they placed between dimensions. Allows the Watchers to cross over." As he spoke, one of the entities moved closer to him, its form becoming more solid. It placed a 6-fingered hand on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus smiled, the expression unnatural on his haggard face. "They only want to help us," he continued, "to share their knowledge. They guided human civilization before, created us in their image. Those aren't benevolent entities," Grace said. Her scientific instruments pointed toward the phenomena. "The readings indicate they're consuming energy from our dimension." "From you, Marcus." "A necessary exchange," Marcus dismissed. "They need physical anchors in our reality, vessels." The implications settled heavily on the team. "They want to possess us," Lucia realized aloud. "To wear us," Marcus corrected. "Like garments." "It's an honor." "I'll be the first, but not the last." The entity beside Marcus had grown more substantial, its features becoming clearer. Large, lidless eyes, no visible nose, a small mouth without lips. Its translucent skin revealed a complex circulatory system unlike any terrestrial organism. James stepped forward cautiously. "Marcus, you need to shut that device down. It's affecting your mind." "My mind has never been clearer," Marcus insisted. "They've shown me truths you can't imagine. Our origin, our purpose." The entity's hand seemed to sink partially into Marcus's shoulder, merging with his flesh. Marcus gasped, eyes widening. "The union begins," he whispered. Eva, filming everything, suddenly pointed to the chamber entrance behind them. "Something's blocking the exit." They turned to see the passageway distorting. Additional shadowy figures beginning to materialize. "They're cutting off our escape," Bennett realized. "We need that device." Grace said urgently to James. "If it opened this breach, it might close it." James nodded, then called out to Marcus. The university sent a message. "They believe you. They're sending a full research team. But we need to stabilize the site first." A flicker of the old Marcus showed in his eyes. Academic ambition. The desire for recognition. "They're lying to you." The entity's voice came through Marcus's mouth. "They fear us. Fear the truth." The merging continued. The entity now partially superimposed over Marcus's form. "Marcus, fight it!" Lucia called desperately. "Remember who you are." The veil disruptor pulsed brighter in Marcus's hand. Reality itself seemed to bend around it, the walls of the chamber appearing fluid, malleable, and through the distortions, more entities began to emerge. "The specimens! Get the specimens!" Grace shouted, crouching behind a fallen column as reality warped around them. She clutched her sample case to her chest, knuckles white with tension. James pulled Eva behind cover as a pulse of energy from the veil disruptor sent equipment flying across the chamber. We need a distraction. Bennett, who had been frantically searching through his notes, suddenly looked up. The translations mentioned a defense mechanism, something about sound that breaks the bridge. Lucia's eyes widened with realization. "My survey equipment, the ultrasonic mapping device. It might work." She fumbled through her pack, withdrawing a small, pyramid-shaped object with intricate patterns etched into its metallic surface. "It emits frequencies for cave mapping, but I can recalibrate it." Meanwhile, Marcus, or what remained of him, stood at the chamber's center, the entity now half-merged with his body. His face flickered between expressions of ecstasy and agony as the merging progressed. "They are coming," he announced, voice distorted. "The first of many. This world will be remade." The veil disruptor pulsed again, reality bending further. More entities began materializing throughout the chamber, their forms becoming increasingly solid. "Hurry!" James urged as Lucia worked with trembling hands to adjust the frequency emitter's settings. "Almost there," she whispered. The cave inscriptions mentioned frequencies that disrupted their molecular cohesion in our dimension. Grace moved beside her, providing another layer of cover. "If we can destabilize the entity's manifestation, we might be able to grab Marcus and the disruptor." Eva continued filming, her camera capturing the impossible scene. "Look at Marcus's eyes," she said softly. "They're changing shape." Indeed, Marcus's eyes had elongated, the pupils transforming into vertical slits. His skin had taken on a greyish pallor, stretching oddly over facial bones that seemed to be restructuring. "He's becoming like them," Bennett observed with horror. "Got it," Lucia announced, fingers pressing a final sequence on the frequency emitter. "Covering your ears won't help. It's beyond human hearing range, but you might feel pressure." She activated the device. Nothing seemed to happen for a moment. Then the entities stopped their movement, their forms shuddering as if caught in a violent wind. The entity merging with Marcus pulled back slightly, its form destabilizing. Marcus screamed, a sound of both loss and relief. "It's working!" James shouted. "Now!" He charged toward Marcus, intent on seizing the veil disruptor. One of the entities moved to intercept him, but its form dissipated into mist as it passed near Lucia's frequency emitter. The remaining entities began retreating, their forms becoming less substantial. The one partially merged with Marcus struggled to maintain its connection, its features contorting in what appeared to be pain. James reached Marcus and grappled for the veil disruptor. Marcus fought back with inhuman strength, his partially transformed face twisted in rage. "They are salvation," he hissed, fingers clawing at James's face. Bennett rushed forward to help James, while Grace and Eva made for the exit. Lucia maintained her position, holding the frequency emitter steady despite the chaos around her. The struggle for the veil disruptor grew violent. Marcus's transformed body possessed strength that James couldn't match. With a powerful shove, he sent James sprawling across the chamber floor. "You can't stop what's coming," Marcus said, his voice now barely recognizable. "The gateway is opening beyond this chamber. The Queen approaches." "Queen?" Bennett questioned, helping James to his feet. Marcus smiled, the expression grotesque on his transforming face. The mother of their hive. The source. Once she crosses, the transformation becomes permanent. The veil disruptor pulsed again, more powerfully than before. Cracks appeared in the chamber walls, revealing swirling darkness beyond. Not simply absence of light, but the absence of reality itself. "We need to leave," Grace called from the passage entrance. "The entire structure is becoming unstable." "Not without Marcus," James insisted. "That's not Marcus anymore," Bennett said grimly, pointing. The merging had progressed further. Marcus's frame had elongated, his joints bending at unnatural angles. Only fragments of his human features remained, the emitters losing power. Lucia warned, the device in her hands beginning to dim. As the frequency weakened, the entities began to resolidify, growing more substantial by the second. "Fall back," James ordered. "To the entrance chamber." The team retreated toward the passage, Lucia keeping the failing emitter between them and the entities. As they reached the entrance, James looked back one last time. Marcus, or what had been Marcus, stood among the entities, now more resembling them than his former self. He raised the veil disruptor overhead, and reality tore open above the altar. Through the rift, something massive began to emerge. The team retreated to the entrance chamber. Equipment hastily gathered, breathing ragged. The passages behind them flickered with strange light as reality continued to warp. "What happened to Marcus?" Eva asked, reviewing her footage with shaking hands. The camera showed his body elongating, features reshaping into something inhuman. Molecular reconfiguration, Grace theorized, examining readings from her instruments. "His DNA is being rewritten in real time. The entities are using him as a template," Bennett added grimly. "Learning how to modify human biology to suit their needs." James paced the entrance chamber, mind racing. "We need to seal this place, bury it." "Make sure nothing gets out." "With what?" Lucia demanded. "We don't have explosives. The university team will arrive at the extraction point, expecting to meet us," Grace reminded them. "If we don't show up, they'll come looking, leading more potential vessels straight to the entities," Bennett concluded. A thunderous rumble shook the cave, dust and small stones raining from the ceiling. The bioluminescent fungi pulsed in chaotic patterns, turning deep crimson. "The emergence is accelerating," Grace said, checking her instruments. "Dimensional barriers are collapsing throughout the cave system." James made a decision. "Bennett, Eva, head for the extraction point. Warn the university. Make sure no one approaches the cave. What about the rest of you?" Eva asked. "We'll try to contain this," James replied. "Maybe there's a way to reverse what's happening to Marcus." "That's not Marcus anymore," Bennett warned. "There might still be enough of him left to reach," Lucia countered. As they argued, Carlos's voice called from the cave entrance. "Dr. Chen!" The team turned in shock to see Carlos standing at the threshold, accompanied by 3 indigenous elders. "Carlos! How did you—" James began. "The jungle speaks," Carlos interrupted. "The Guardians heard its warnings." He gestured to the elders. "These are the last keepers of the ancient knowledge. They know what sleeps here." The oldest of the elders stepped forward, carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. He spoke in his native language, Carlos translating. He says, "The star demons awaken. The seal is broken. The doorway must be closed before the queen fully manifests." The elder unwrapped the bundle, revealing a small metallic sphere, perfectly smooth and unusually dense. "What is it?" Grace asked. "The anchor," Carlos translated as the elder spoke. "It holds reality in place. The original Guardians used it to seal the doorway centuries ago. A dimensional stabilizer," Lucia whispered. Reaching for it, the elder pulled back, speaking sharply. "Only one who shares blood with the Guardians can wield it," Carlos translated. "I'm of their lineage. I will take it. You can't go back there," James protested. "The entities will consume all life if not stopped," Carlos finished. Another tremor, stronger than before, shook the cave. From deep within, an inhuman wailing echoed through the passages. "She comes," the elder said in accented English, his face grave. At that moment, Marcus appeared at the far end of the entrance chamber, or rather what had once been Marcus. His body had transformed, limbs elongated, joints reconfigured, skin translucent grey. Only his eyes retained something recognizably human, a trapped awareness behind alien features. "Too late," the transformed Marcus said, his voice layered with multiple tones. "The Queen crosses. This world will be remade." Behind him, shadows shifted unnaturally, entities moving just beyond normal perception. The elder spoke rapidly to Carlos, who nodded grimly. "The anchor must be placed at the altar," Carlos translated. "It will stabilize reality, but only temporarily. The cave must then be sealed with blood sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" James demanded. "Willing," Carlos answered simply. "A guardian's blood freely given." The transformed Marcus tilted his head at an impossible angle, studying them. "Your primitive tools cannot stop what comes." He raised a six-fingered hand, and the air distorted around it. "We have evolved beyond your understanding." The elder pressed the dimensional anchor into Carlos's hands, speaking urgent words. "He says I must go now. While the Queen is still partially between worlds," Carlos translated. "The moment of vulnerability is brief. We'll create a diversion," James decided. "Grace, can you recalibrate Lucia's frequency emitter?" Grace nodded. "Enough for one more strong pulse." Eva Bennett still head for extraction. "The world needs to know what happened here, and you?" Eva asked. James looked at the transformed Marcus, a former colleague now turned alien vessel. "We'll buy Carlos time." The transformed Marcus seemed to sense their plan. His altered face contorted in what might have been a smile. "Your minds will join the collective. Your bodies will serve the new order." Behind him, more transformed figures emerged from the shadows, the missing porters. Their bodies now twisted into hybrid forms. Carlos clutched the dimensional anchor, its surface beginning to glow with an inner light. "The ancestors guide me," he whispered. The elder placed a hand on Carlos's shoulder, speaking a final blessing. Then reality itself seemed to bend as the transformed Marcus raised the veiled disruptor, and the true battle for Earth began. "Now!" James shouted. Grace activated the recalibrated frequency emitter. The device emitted a high-pitched whine before releasing a pulse of invisible energy that rippled through the entrance chamber. The transformed Marcus and his followers recoiled, their altered forms destabilizing momentarily. James, Lucia, and one of the elders used the distraction to dash into a side passage, drawing several entities away from Carlos. "This way," Lucia called, leading them toward a chamber they'd mapped earlier. Behind them, Carlos clutched the dimensional anchor and slipped into a different passage, heading toward the central altar. The remaining elders chanted protective words as they retreated toward the cave entrance. In the side chamber, James sealed the entrance by collapsing a weak section of the ceiling. "That won't hold them long." The elder with them moved to a previously unnoticed alcove in the chamber wall. He pressed his palm against a seemingly solid section of stone, which receded, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew a crystalline object roughly the size of a human heart. Its surface faceted and semi-translucent. As light struck it, colors swirled within its depths. "What is that?" Lucia asked. The elder spoke in his language, gesturing at the crystal and then at his temple. "I think he's saying it contains memories," James interpreted. "Knowledge." The elder nodded, then pressed the crystal into James's hands. When James touched it, the crystal pulsed with internal light. Images flooded his mind, not like memories but more immediate, as if he were experiencing them firsthand. He gasped, staggering backward. "My God, what is it?" Lucia steadied him. "The truth," James whispered. "About them." "About us." Through the crystal, James witnessed the ancient history of Earth, the arrival of the entities from a dying universe, seeking refuge. Their initial peaceful contact with early humans, sharing knowledge, guiding development. Then their gradual corruption, as they discovered they could inhabit human bodies, extend their existence by consuming human consciousness. He saw the Great War that followed, how humanity's ancestors, aided by a faction of uncorrupted entities, built the containment system. The cave was not simply a prison, but a bridge between dimensions that could only be fully opened from both sides. They were refugees, James explained, voice trembling, escaping the death of their universe. But our reality changed them, twisted them, made them hungry for physical form. And Marcus, Lucia asked, he's the key. They needed someone to willingly open the doorway from our side. They manipulated him through his ambition. His desire for validation. The elder gestured urgently at the crystal, then at the blocked entrance, where sounds of entities attempting to break through grew louder. James focused on the crystal again, searching deeper into the stored knowledge. New images formed, the containment system's design, the original ritual used to seal the doorway, the dimensional anchor Carlos carries. It can reset the containment field, but only if placed at the exact center of the altar during the Queen's crossing. The moment when she's most vulnerable, and the sacrifice, Lucia asked quietly. James's expression grew grim as the knowledge transferred. The anchor requires a consciousness to power it, a mind that understands both worlds. A loud crash indicated the entities had broken through the collapsed entrance. The transformed Marcus stood in the opening, his altered form now even less human. The crystal, he hissed, reaching toward them with elongated fingers. The last memory of our defeat. The elder stepped between them, speaking rapid phrases that made the transformed Marcus hesitate momentarily. "Run!" James shouted to Lucia, clutching the memory crystal. "Find Carlos. He needs to know the full ritual." Lucia disappeared through a small fissure in the chamber wall as James and the elder faced the transformed Marcus. "You cannot stop the convergence," Marcus said, his voice an unsettling blend of human and other. "Your world and ours will become one. The Queen will remake all in her image." "You were a scientist, Marcus," James replied. "You sought truth. See the truth now." He held up the memory crystal, which pulsed brighter. "See what they really are." For a brief moment, something flickered across the transformed Marcus's face, a hint of recognition, of the human consciousness buried beneath the alien overlay. "James?" The voice was briefly Marcus's own, confused and afraid. Then the entity reasserted control. "The vessel is ours," it hissed. The elder began a chant, his aged voice growing stronger with each word. The memory crystal resonated with the chant, pulsing in rhythm. James understood through the crystal's knowledge. The elder was attempting to temporarily separate Marcus's consciousness from the entity controlling him. A momentary window to reach his friend. "Marcus, if you can hear me," James said urgently, "you need to fight them from the inside. When the Queen fully crosses, focus your consciousness on rejecting her." The transformed Marcus screamed, a sound of both rage and agony as internal conflict tore through his altered form. Behind him, more entities gathered, their forms shimmering with otherworldly energy. "Go," the elder said in accented English, taking the crystal from James. "Help the Guardian." "I will hold them." James hesitated, then nodded grimly. He slipped through the same fissure Lucia had used, the elder's chanting and Marcus's inhuman screams echoing behind him. The memory crystal blazed with light as the elder held it high, facing the gathering entities with ancient defiance in his eyes. James navigated the narrow fissure, emerging into a connecting passage where Lucia waited. "I heard screaming," she said. "The elder—" He stayed behind. James's voice was tight. "We need to find Carlos." They moved deeper into the cave system, the walls around them pulsing with increasingly erratic bioluminescence. Tremors shook the passages at irregular intervals, reality itself becoming unstable. "The Queen is nearly through," Lucia observed, as a particularly violent tremor sent rocks clattering from the ceiling. They rounded a corner to find Grace crouched behind an outcropping, her scientific equipment arranged in a semicircle around her. "Grace," James called. "We thought you'd gone with Eva and Bennett." "Someone needed to monitor the dimensional fluctuations," she replied, not looking up from her instruments. "The readings are off the charts. Reality is thinning throughout the cave system. Have you seen Carlos?" Lucia asked. Grace pointed toward a passage leading downward. He went that way, toward the central chamber. But he's not alone. Before James could ask what she meant, movement from the passage entrance caught his attention. Carlos emerged, accompanied by a group of indigenous men, at least a dozen, carrying traditional weapons and wearing ceremonial paint. The village guardians, Carlos explained. When the elders sensed the awakening, they sent for reinforcements. One of the men stepped forward, presenting James with a long spear. Its shaft was wooden, darkened with age, but its tip gleamed with an otherworldly light, a crystalline material similar to the memory crystal, but shaped to a deadly point. "What is this?" James asked, taking the weapon. "Barrier spear," Carlos translated as the man spoke. "When the star demons first came, our ancestors fought them with these. The crystal tip disrupts their form, sends them back to their world temporarily." Another guardian spoke, demonstrating with his spear a thrusting motion followed by a twist. "You must pierce and turn," Carlos translated. "This separates their energy from our reality." Grace approached, examining the crystal tip with scientific curiosity. "The crystalline structure must create some kind of localized dimensional instability. Fascinating. Can these kill the entities?" Lucia asked. Carlos shook his head after listening to one of the guardians. "Not kill, only disperse. Send back, only the Queen can be truly destroyed, and only at the moment of crossing." James hefted the spear, testing its weight. "Then we need to clear a path to the altar for the dimensional anchor." Carlos nodded grimly. "The guardians will lead the way. But first," he gestured to one of the men who approached with a small clay pot. "Protection." The man dipped his fingers into the pot and drew symbols on James's forehead, then Lucia's and Grace's. The substance was cool and tingled slightly against the skin. "Fungi paste," Carlos explained. "From the original guardian species. It masks your thoughts from the entities." With preparations complete, the group moved toward the central chamber. The passages widened as they descended, the architecture shifting from natural cave formations to the impossible geometry of the entity's design. They paused at a junction where the path opened into a vast antechamber. Inside, transformed humans, former porters and several university researchers who had arrived early, moved in unnatural patterns, their bodies warped into hybrid forms. They're creating a defensive perimeter around the central chamber, Grace whispered, checking her instruments. "The Queen is nearly complete." One of the guardians spoke quietly to Carlos, who translated for the others. "There is another way, a hidden passage the original guardians created." He led them to what appeared to be a solid wall. One of the guardians pressed specific points in sequence, and a section of wall rotated silently, revealing a narrow tunnel. "This will lead us behind the altar," Carlos explained. "But the Queen will sense us as we approach. We will have only moments." James gripped the barrier spear tightly. "What do you need us to do?" "Hold back the transformed ones while I place the anchor," Carlos replied. "The ritual requires concentration." "And the sacrifice?" Lucia asked quietly. Carlos met her gaze steadily. "My family has guarded this secret for generations. This is what we were born for." Before anyone could respond, a psychic shockwave rippled through the cave system. Everyone staggered, clutching their heads as alien thoughts briefly invaded their minds. Hunger, anticipation, triumph. "She comes," one of the guardians whispered in English. Grace checked her instruments, face pale. "The dimensional barrier is collapsing completely. We have minutes, not hours. Then we go now," James decided as they prepared to enter the secret passage. A transformed figure appeared at the junction behind them. Marcus, his body now almost entirely alien, only hints of human features remaining. "I feel you," he said, voice resonating with multiple tones. "The Queen feels you? Your resistance is fascinating, but futile." James raised the barrier spear, its crystal tip glowing brighter in proximity to the transformed Marcus. "There's still a human in there, Marcus," he called. "Fight it!" Marcus's altered face contorted into what might have been a smile. "Marcus is here." He watches, He understands now what evolution truly means. The Guardians moved into defensive positions as more transformed figures appeared behind Marcus. "Go!" James shouted to Carlos. "We'll hold them here." Carlos and two Guardians slipped into the hidden passage as the others formed a defensive line. Barrier spears raised against the approaching entities. The final battle for humanity had begun. The transformed Marcus lunged forward with impossible speed, his elongated limbs covering distance in unnatural bounds. James raised the barrier spear, bracing for impact. "Remember the twist," Carlos called, before disappearing into the passage. James thrust the spear forward as Marcus approached. The crystalline tip connected with the transformed chest, sinking in without resistance. James twisted sharply as instructed. The effect was immediate. Marcus's transformed body convulsed, a high-pitched whine emanating from his distorted mouth. His form seemed to flicker, becoming temporarily translucent before solidifying again. He staggered backward, a ripple of destabilization spreading across his altered flesh. The indigenous Guardians advanced in practiced formation, their movements suggesting generations of training for this exact scenario. Their barrier spears flashed with crystalline light as they engaged the transformed humans. "They're coordinating telepathically," Grace observed, monitoring readings on her last functioning device. "The entities share a hive mind. They know exactly where each other is." One of the older Guardians who had remained with them reached into a leather pouch at his waist and withdrew a small object, a hand drum made of stretched skin over a wooden frame, adorned with symbols matching those on the cave walls. "What is that?" Lucia asked. The Guardian didn't respond directly, but began to beat the drum in a complex rhythm. The sound was unexpectedly deep for such a small instrument, resonating through the chamber with unusual acoustics. The transformed humans, including Marcus, immediately reacted, clutching at their elongated heads, their movements becoming uncoordinated and confused. "It's disrupting their communication," Grace realized, breaking the hive mind connection. The Guardian continued the drumming, the pattern shifting continuously in ways that seemed to cause maximum disorientation among the entities. The indigenous fighters pressed their advantage, driving back the confused, transformed humans with their barrier spears. "We need to move toward the central chamber," James decided. "Support Carlos from another direction," Lucia nodded. "The passage we mapped earlier should connect." With the Guardian drummer providing cover, they slipped away from the main battle, entering a narrow side passage. Behind them, the sounds of combat faded, replaced by the omnipresent hum of the deteriorating dimensional barrier. The passage opened into a balcony overlooking the central chamber and the scene. Before them froze their blood. The chamber had transformed beyond recognition. The altar now floated unsupported in the center, surrounded by a swirling vortex of energy. Above it, reality itself had torn open, creating a window into another dimension, a realm of impossible geometries and colors that hurt the human eye. Through this rift, something was emerging, a massive, multi-limbed form that seemed to shift and change as it crossed between dimensions. The Queen. Below the altar, Carlos and his two companions fought desperately against transformed humans guarding the approach. Carlos clutched the dimensional anchor, trying to reach the altar while his companions provided cover with their barrier spears. "He'll never make it through alone," James said grimly. The Guardian with the echo drum assessed the situation, then began a new rhythm, faster, more complex. The sound echoed throughout the chamber, causing the transformed humans to falter momentarily. "Now!" James shouted. He leapt from the balcony to a ledge below, using the barrier spear to control his descent. Lucia and Grace followed, with the drummer providing cover from above. As they landed, the transformed Marcus appeared from a side entrance, moving with renewed purpose. The drumming seemed to affect him less than the others. "The Queen strengthens him," Grace warned. "He's her primary vessel." Marcus spotted them and changed direction, heading straight for their position. His transformed body now barely resembled anything human, more entity than man, moving with liquid grace. "James," he called, his voice a dissonant chorus. "Still fighting for outdated concepts? Evolution requires sacrifice. Your kind is the past. We are the future. You're not evolution," James replied, raising his barrier spear. "Your invasion." Lucia circled to the side, her own spear ready. "Marcus, if you're still in there, help us!" "Fight them from within." A flicker of something, confusion, recognition, crossed the transformed face. "Lucia, where—" The moment of humanity vanished as quickly as it appeared. The entity reasserted control, Marcus's body contorting into a combat stance. "The vessel serves the queen," it hissed. Across the chamber, Carlos had nearly reached the altar, the dimensional anchor glowing brighter in his hands as he approached the focal point of the dimensional breach. The queen's massive form continued emerging, now half materialized into their reality. "We need to buy Carlos more time," James told Lucia and Grace. "Keep Marcus occupied." Above them, the Guardian's drumming reached a crescendo, the patterns becoming almost hypnotic in their complexity. The transformed humans throughout the chamber moved sluggishly, confused by the disruption to their hive mind, all except Marcus, who launched himself at James with terrifying speed. The barrier spear caught him mid-leap, the crystalline tip sinking into his transformed shoulder. James twisted and Marcus's form destabilized partially, but not enough to stop his momentum. They crashed together to the ground, the spear pinned between them. "James!" Lucia moved to help, but was intercepted by another transformed human. As James struggled with the transformed Marcus, he glimpsed Carlos finally reaching the altar, the dimensional anchor held high. The queen, sensing the threat, released a psychic scream that tore through everyone's minds like physical pain, and Carlos began the final ritual. The queen's psychic scream faded, leaving a ringing silence. James fought against the transformed Marcus, both grappling for control of the barrier spear. Despite his training, James was no match for the entity's inhuman strength. "Marcus," James gasped, "remember who you are." The transformed face twisted in conflict, the eyes flickering between alien emptiness and human recognition. Across the chamber, Carlos stood at the altar, the dimensional anchor pulsing with increasing intensity. He began chanting in his ancestral language, each word seeming to carry physical weight in the destabilized reality. The queen, now 3/4 materialized through the rift, focused her attention on Carlos. Her form defied description, a shifting mass of limbs and sensory organs arranged in patterns that human minds couldn't process. Those who looked directly at her experienced vertigo and nausea. "She's targeting Carlos," Grace called out, monitoring the energy patterns. "The anchor isn't fully activated yet." One of Carlos's companions reached into a pouch and withdrew a strange object. A braided cord composed of materials that seemed to shift between solid and ethereal. He thrust it toward Carlos. "The tether." Lucia recognized it from the wall inscriptions. "It protects the consciousness during the ritual." The queen extended a limb toward Carlos, reality warping around it. Before it could reach him, the companion looped the cord around Carlos's wrist. The tether glowed with inner light, creating a visible connection between Carlos and the dimensional anchor. Carlos continued the ritual, his voice growing stronger despite the queen's assault on his mind. The anchor's glow intensified, sending pulses of energy toward the rift. Meanwhile, James was losing his struggle against the transformed Marcus. The barrier spear had been knocked aside, and Marcus's inhuman strength was overwhelming. "James!" Lucia shouted, throwing her spear. The weapon spun through the air. James caught it by the shaft and immediately thrust upward. The crystalline tip pierced the transformed Marcus's chest. With the last of his strength, James twisted the spear. Marcus's body convulsed, becoming partially translucent. For a moment, the entity's control weakened, and Marcus's true consciousness surfaced. "James," he gasped, his voice briefly his own. "I'm sorry. I wanted recognition so badly." "Fight it, Marcus," James urged. "Help us stop the queen." Marcus's face contorted with effort.
Can't?
Hold it back, long. His gaze fixed on something over James's shoulder.
The tether.
You need another... He gestured weakly toward a small alcove near the altar. Inside, barely visible, was another braided cord similar to the one Carlos wore. What does it do? James asked urgently. Separates consciousness from body, Marcus managed. Entities can't possess. A tethered mind. His body convulsed again, the entity reasserting control. The alien presence glared through Marcus's eyes. The vessel is ours. James rolled away as Marcus's transformed body lunged at him. The indigenous guardian, with the echo drum, increased his tempo, the sound waves momentarily disorienting the entity. James used the opportunity to sprint toward the alcove, dodging transformed humans and guardians locked in combat. He reached the alcove and grabbed the tether, feeling an odd vibration as it made contact with his skin. At the altar, Carlos's ritual had reached its crescendo. The dimensional anchor hovered above his hands, spinning rapidly. The queen had fully emerged now, her massive form towering over the chamber, radiating malevolent power. The anchor needs a consciousness, Carlos shouted over the dimensional turbulence. A willing sacrifice to power the seal. The tether in James's hand pulsed in response to Carlos's words. Understanding dawned. The tether could protect a consciousness during transfer to the anchor, preserving identity rather than allowing complete dissolution. James, Grace called out, her scientific instruments crackling with energy. The dimensional barrier is collapsing completely. It's now or never. Carlos placed the anchor at the exact center of the altar. It began to absorb the dimensional energies swirling around them, creating a counter-vortex that pulled at the rift. The queen sensed the threat. She lashed out with multiple limbs, one striking Carlos and sending him sprawling. The ritual faltered, the anchor's glow dimming. It needs to be completed. Lucia shouted. James looked at the tether in his hand, then at the struggling Carlos. A decision crystallized in his mind. Lucia, he called, throwing his barrier spear to her.
Hold them off.
He sprinted toward the altar, the tether clutched tightly in his hand. The transformed Marcus saw his intention and moved to intercept, but was blocked by indigenous guardians. James reached the altar and grabbed the faltering dimensional anchor. The tether automatically wrapped around his wrist, its braided pattern seeming to sink into his skin. "What are you doing?" Carlos gasped, struggling to his feet. "Finishing what you started," James replied. He placed the anchor back at the center of the altar and resumed the chant that Carlos had begun, the words somehow known to him through the tether's connection. The queen loomed over him, her incomprehensible form contorting with rage as she sensed the renewed threat. James locked eyes with Lucia across the chamber, a silent goodbye passing between them. Then he pressed his hands firmly on the anchor and completed the ritual. Light erupted from the dimensional anchor as James completed the ritual. The energy coursed through his body via the consciousness tether, transforming him into a conduit between worlds. James screamed, not in pain, but in transcendence. His consciousness expanded beyond his physical form, touching both realities simultaneously. In that moment of connection, he understood everything: the entities, their dimension, the ancient guardians, the true nature of reality itself. "The barrier is reforming," Grace shouted, her instruments registering massive energy fluctuations. "The rift is closing." The queen writhed in fury, her partially materialized form beginning to destabilize as the dimensional anchor pulled her back toward her native reality. She lashed out with multiple limbs, one connecting with James's physical body, lifting him from the altar. "James!" Lucia cried out, but James's consciousness was no longer fully within his body. The tether glowed brilliantly around his wrist, maintaining a connection between his mind and the anchor, even as the queen held him aloft. Carlos struggled to his feet, reaching into his pack. He withdrew what appeared to be a curved piece of transparent material, like a lens from an impossible telescope. The lens, he gasped. From the first Guardians. He held it up to his eye, looking through it at the Queen and the dimensional rift. The lens revealed patterns invisible to the naked eye, currents of energy, weak points in the dimensional barrier, the true form of the Queen beyond human perception. There, Carlos pointed to a specific point where the Queen's form connected to the rift. The tether point. It's her anchor to her dimension. Lucia understood immediately. She raised her barrier spear, aiming at the spot Carlos had identified. I can't reach it from here, she realized. The target too high and distant. The transformed Marcus suddenly appeared beside her. His form flickered between entity and human, the internal struggle visible in his contorted features. Marcus? Lucia asked cautiously, barrier spear still raised. Not much time, Marcus gasped, his voice his own, though strained with effort. James's sacrifice weakened their hold. Temporarily, he gestured to the spear in her hand. Give it to me. I can reach the tether point. How do I know this isn't a trick? Lucia demanded. Marcus's eyes cleared momentarily, fully human again. Because I'm the one who got us into this. My ambition. My fault. Carlos approached, viewing Marcus through the dimensional lens. He speaks truth. The entity is suppressed for now. Lucia made her decision. She handed Marcus the barrier spear. Thank you, he whispered. Within human strength, a final gift from his partial transformation, Marcus leapt upward toward the Queen, higher than any normal human could manage. The barrier spear clutched in both hands, he aimed for the tether point, revealed by the dimensional lens. The crystalline tip connected with perfect precision, striking the invisible anchor point. Marcus twisted the spear with the last of his strength. The Queen's form convulsed violently. A sound beyond human hearing tore through the chamber, felt rather than heard. The rift began contracting rapidly, pulling the Queen back. James, still suspended in the Queen's grip, was being drawn toward the rift with her. His physical body was half translucent now, the consciousness tether the only thing maintaining his human identity as the anchor absorbed his mind. "James!" Lucia shouted. "Let go!" But James couldn't let go. The ritual required his consciousness to complete the seal. His eyes met Lucia's one last time, somehow still himself, despite the transformation. Marcus, still clinging to the Queen's form, looked back at his former colleagues. "I'm sorry," he called, his voice fading, as the entity within him reasserted control. "Tell them." I found the truth. The rift contracted further, pulling both James and Marcus toward it, along with the Queen. The dimensional anchor pulsed with increasing intensity, drawing power from James's consciousness to seal the breach permanently. In the final moment before the rift closed completely, Carlos raised the dimensional lens again. Through it, he saw something the others couldn't. James's consciousness, preserved within the tether, separate from his physical form. Not destroyed, but transformed, becoming part of the barrier between worlds. The lens also revealed Marcus's consciousness, finally breaking free from the entity as they were pulled back through the rift. A moment of redemption before the end. With a thunderous implosion, the rift sealed itself. The Queen, James, and Marcus vanished as the dimensions separated once more. The dimensional anchor fell to the altar, its glow fading to a soft pulse, a heartbeat maintaining the barrier between worlds. Silence fell across the chamber. The transformed humans throughout the cave collapsed like puppets with cut strings. The controlling entities ripped back to their dimension. Only the indigenous guardians remained standing, their ancient mission fulfilled at terrible cost. Lucia approached the altar slowly, reaching for the anchor. Carlos stopped her with a gentle hand. "It contains his consciousness now," he said softly. "He is the guardian between worlds." Through her tears, Lucia nodded in understanding. "And Marcus?" Carlos handed her the dimensional lens. "See for yourself." She looked through it at the space where the rift had been. For just a moment, she glimpsed two figures standing on the other side of reality, James and Marcus, transformed but somehow still themselves, standing guard at the dimensional boundary. Then the vision faded, leaving only the sealed cave and the soft glow of the anchor, the dimensional barrier sealed. But the cave system had been critically destabilized. Tremors intensified as reality reasserted itself. The impossible architecture of the entity's construction beginning to collapse under normal physical laws. "We need to get out," Grace urged, her instruments showing dangerous structural degradation throughout the cave. "The whole system is coming down." The remaining transformed humans lay unconscious on the chamber floor, their bodies slowly reverting to human form as the entity's influence faded. Some indigenous guardians gathered them up, preparing for evacuation. "What about the artifacts?" Lucia asked, looking at the dimensional anchor still pulsing softly on the altar. "We can't leave them for someone else to find." "The cave must be sealed permanently," Carlos agreed. "But we won't make it out if we stay to collapse it manually." One of the elder guardians approached, carrying a small pouch made of woven plant fibers. He spoke rapidly to Carlos, who translated for the others. He says the original guardians left a failsafe. Seeds from the sentinel fungi, engineered to respond to the sealing of the rift. The elder opened the pouch, revealing what looked like crystalline spores, similar to the bioluminescent fungi throughout the cave, but more concentrated, almost glowing with internal energy. "What do they do?" Grace asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "They grow rapidly, reinforcing the cave structure long enough for us to escape. Then trigger a controlled collapse," Carlos translated, as the elder continued explaining. "The fungi network was always part of the containment system," the elder demonstrated, taking one seed and pressing it against a crack already forming in the chamber wall. The crystalline spore immediately sprouted tendrils that spread across the surface, reinforcing the weakening structure. "Amazing," Grace whispered. "Programmable organic technology." The elder handed the pouch to Carlos with solemn ceremony, speaking formally in their native language. "He says, 'I am the last guardian of this lineage,'" Carlos translated. "The responsibility passes to me." Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Chunks of ceiling crashed down around them. "We need to move now," Lucia urged. Carlos nodded. He took a handful of the guardian seeds and pressed them against the altar. The crystalline spores immediately activated, spreading across the ancient stone and encasing the dimensional anchor in a protective shell. "They'll preserve the anchor while ensuring no one can access it." "Again," Carlos explained, the elder pointed to a different passage than the one they had entered through. Carlos nodded in understanding. "There's a faster way out," he told the others. The Guardian Passage. It was designed as an escape route. They moved quickly, the indigenous guardians leading the way, carrying the unconscious former vessels. Carlos paused at strategic points to place guardian seeds, which immediately sprouted to reinforce weakening sections, long enough for them to pass safely. Grace supported a dazed Eva, who they had found huddled in a side passage. Her camera clutched protectively to her chest. "I got it all," Eva murmured. "The whole thing, James, Marcus." "The Queen? You're safe now," Grace assured her. Though none of them knew if that was truly the case, as they navigated the collapsing tunnels, Lucia noted the bioluminescent fungi changing color, from its original blue-green to a deep purple that somehow indicated morning. The entire network seemed to be responding to their passage, brightening to illuminate their escape route. "It's sentient, isn't it?" she asked Carlos. "The fungi network. It's been helping us," Carlos nodded. "The original Guardians created it as an ally. It remembers." They reached a chamber with a vertical shaft leading upward toward natural sunlight. Climbing equipment had been cached there centuries ago, maintained by generations of indigenous Guardians. As the last of their group began ascending, Carlos placed the remaining Guardian seeds in a pattern around the chamber. The crystalline spores activated immediately, forming an intricate network of glowing tendrils that spread throughout the visible cave structure. "What now?" Lucia asked. "We climb," Carlos said simply. "When we reach the surface, the seeds will complete their program." The ascent was arduous, the shaft occasionally shuddering with tremors from below. Halfway up, they heard a deep resonant tone emanating from the cave system, like a massive bell being struck. The final phase begins, Carlos explained. The seeds are synchronizing to collapse the entire network simultaneously. When they finally emerged into the jungle daylight, the contrast was almost painful. Birds called in the canopy above. Insects hummed in the undergrowth. Normal sounds that seemed alien after the otherworldly experience below. The last guardian barely cleared the shaft entrance when the tone from below reached a crescendo. The ground shook violently, trees swaying. A massive implosion collapsed the shaft and a large section of jungle around it, leaving a depression that would soon be reclaimed by the rainforest. Lucia stared at the collapsed area, thinking of James and Marcus, now existing between dimensions as eternal guardians. "It's over," she whispered. Carlos shook his head. "No, it is contained for now, but eternal vigilance remains our burden." In his hand, he held one final guardian seed, preserved for the next generation of protectors. 1 month later, Lucia sat in the sterile conference room of Universidad Nacional's archaeology department, facing a panel of skeptical academics. Professor Whitman presided, his expression professionally neutral, but eyes cold with disbelief. "Dr. Reyes," he began, "your report describes events that are frankly impossible. Interdimensional entities, non-human intelligence, and you claim Dr. Harrington and Dr. Chen were absorbed into another dimension?" Lucia met his gaze steadily. "I've reported exactly what happened, Professor." "With no evidence," Whitman countered. "The cave system collapsed. The bodies of Dr. Harrington and Dr. Chen were never recovered. The indigenous guides tell fantastic stories, and conveniently, all of Miss Santos's video footage was corrupted." Eva, seated beside Lucia, clutched her camera protectively. "Not corrupted. Interdimensional interference affected the recording medium. But I saw everything." Grace, the third survivor present, placed a folder on the table. "My readings show energy patterns inconsistent with any known physical phenomena. The data is clear, even if the interpretation seems fantastic." Whitman sighed. "The university is proposing an official explanation of a natural cave collapse following an unauthorized excavation. Tragic, but straightforward." "A cover-up," Lucia stated flatly. "A practical response," Whitman corrected. "The alternative would destroy the university's credibility and your careers. We're prepared to credit Dr. Harrington posthumously with significant archaeological findings regarding pre-Columbian cultures. His reputation will be restored, but not the truth," Lucia insisted. The meeting concluded with an uneasy agreement. The survivors would not publicly contradict the official narrative, and the university would fund a memorial research foundation in Marcus and James's names. Later, the three women met Carlos at a small cafe away from campus. He listened silently as they recounted the meeting. "It is always this way," he said finally. "The truth is too dangerous for most to accept, so we just let it be buried." Eva asked bitterly. Carlos reached into his pocket and withdrew a small triangular crystal, similar in composition to the dimensional lens, but with different properties. "What is that?" Grace asked. "A witness prism," Carlos explained. "The final artifact entrusted to my family. It records psychic impressions of events, storing them for future generations." He placed it on the table. Within its crystalline structure, swirling colors moved like captured memories. "I activated it during our escape," he continued. "It contains everything we experienced, the truth, preserved for those ready to understand it." "Who would that be?" Lucia asked. "There are others who know about the entities," Carlos said. "Guardians from different traditions around the world. This isn't the only containment site. The implications settled heavily on them." "You mean this has happened before? Elsewhere?" Grace asked. Carlos nodded. "The entities have attempted to cross many times throughout human history. Different cultures develop different methods of containment, and they're all still holding." Ava's voice held new concern. "For now," Carlos replied. "But the barriers weaken over time. New guardians must be trained." He looked at each of them meaningfully. "You three experience the truth. You are witnesses now, part of the Guardian network. whether you choose to accept it or not. Grace studied the witness prism with scientific fascination. This technology, it could revolutionize how we understand consciousness. It's not for public knowledge, Carlos cautioned. Not yet. Humanity isn't ready. So what do we do? Lucia asked. Live your lives. Continue your work. But stay vigilant, Carlos advised. I'll be in contact when it's necessary. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. The university recovery team found this near the cave entrance. He handed Lucia a small package wrapped in protective cloth. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal Marcus's journal. Somehow preserved despite everything. The final pages might interest you, Carlos suggested. After he left, Lucia opened the journal to its last entries. Marcus's handwriting had changed in the final pages, becoming more precise, almost alien in its geometric perfection. The content, however, was undeniably human, a confession, an apology, and finally a warning. They are patient. They are ancient, and they are everywhere. The cave was just one door of many. James and I stand guard now between realities, but we are only two. Others must continue our work in the physical world. Look for the signs. Trust those who know. The truth is stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined, but also more dangerous. We were never alone in the universe, and we never will be. Lucia closed the journal, meeting the eyes of her fellow survivors. Without words, a pact formed between them. The witness prism on the table pulsed once, capturing the moment, the beginning of a new generation of guardians. 5 years later, a small group gathered around a simple stone marker at the edge of the University Botanical Gardens. The memorial read, Dr. Marcus Harrington and Dr. James Chen. Their search for truth transcended boundaries. Lucia, now heading the archaeology department's controversial new division of ancient cultural exchange patterns, placed a small bouquet beside the marker. Grey streaked her once solid black hair, the stress of maintaining two lives, academic and guardian, taking its visible toll. Beside her stood Grace, who had shifted her research to biological adaptation in extreme environments, a scientific cover for studying the fungi samples she had secretly preserved. Her papers on theoretical biological structures had earned both ridicule and intense interest from certain government agencies. Eva completed their trio, her documentary on the Amazon expedition having been heavily edited to show only the archaeological discoveries before the tragic cave collapse. The film had won awards while saying nothing of the truth. She now worked independently, documenting indigenous knowledge systems around the world and secretly identifying other containment sites. 5 years, Lucia murmured. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. The dreams haven't stopped, Grace admitted. I still see them, James and Marcus standing at the boundary. Eva nodded. The footage still changes. When I review the original files, I catch glimpses of them, watching. Carlos approached from the garden path, no longer the expedition guide, but now a respected consultant on indigenous archaeological heritage. Around his neck hung a small medallion, a disc of unidentifiable metal etched with symbols from dozens of ancient cultures. The network is growing, he said without preamble. 3 new guardians identified in Peru, 2 in Cambodia. Any breaches? Grace asked quietly. Minor fluctuations in the Siberian site, Carlos replied. Contained by the local guardians. He touched the medallion briefly. The ancients were right to establish the network. No single containment site stays sealed forever. A tall man in a government suit observed them from a respectful distance. Bennett Reed had taken a different path after the expedition, joining a classified research division. His linguistics expertise now focused on what his department euphemistically called non-standard communication patterns. Bennett approached, nodding to each of them. Sorry I'm late. Washington keeps a tight leash these days. Have they figured it out yet? Lucia asked. Bennett shook his head. They've identified anomalies at various sites worldwide. Energy patterns, unexplained readings. But they're still stuck in the physical paradigm, looking for material explanations. Let's hope it stays that way, Eva said. Carlos's nephew, now a young man of 20, joined them. He wore a smaller version of Carlos's medallion, the next generation of guard. Guardians being trained. Uncle, he said urgently. The witness prism activated this morning. By itself. Carlos's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed concern. Show me. The young man produced the triangular crystal. Within its depths, images formed, not memories of past events, but something new. James and Marcus, their forms evolved beyond human, but still recognizable, standing at what appeared to be a dimensional boundary. James's voice emerged from the prism. Distorted but clear enough, the barriers thin again. New crossings are being attempted. Different methods, different locations. They're adapting, learning from past failures. Marcus's voice followed. The Queen rebuilds her strength. She has not forgotten Earth. Tell them, Carlos. The next wave has already begun. The prism went dark, its message delivered. Silence fell over the small gathering. 5 years of vigilance, of building networks, of preparing, and yet it might not be enough. We knew this was coming, Carlos said finally. The containment was never permanent, only a reprieve. What do we do? Grace asked. What we've been doing, Lucia replied. But more urgently now, identify sites, train guardians, preserve knowledge. Bennett checked his secure phone. My department has detected unusual energy signatures at 7 locations globally in the past month. They think it's a new form of terrorism. In a way, they're not wrong, Eva observed darkly. Carlos's medallion gleamed in the sunlight, the ancient symbol seeming to shift subtly as he turned it. Within its metallic structure were encoded coordinates to every known containment site on Earth, knowledge passed down through generations of guardians. It's time to activate the full network, he decided. All sites, all guardians. He looked at each of them. Scientists, documentarian, linguist, the next generation, united by a truth the world wasn't ready to accept. James and Marcus bought us time, Carlos said. We won't waste it. Lucia placed her hand on the memorial stone, a silent promise to her lost colleagues. The truth transcended boundaries, she quoted from the inscription. And so will we. As they dispersed to begin their preparations, none of them noticed a slight shimmer in the air near the memorial, a momentary thinning of reality. Through it, 2 figures briefly observed the Guardians before the boundary resealed. The battle for Earth would continue, fought in shadows by those who had glimpsed beyond the veil and returned to warn others. Some truths were never meant to be buried.